That's my seat. Tell him to move.
You gotta go, so we can check.
Sir, we need to check your ticket.
The system seems to have an error. We'd have to ask you to move to a lower class, but we will compensate you.
I am sitting in the correct seat.
You are causing a disturbance, and if you do not cooperate, we will call security.
No.
Security, I need assistance immediately. We have a situation on board.
Michael, I am being asked to leave my own plane.
That's the man. Take him outside.
Stop. No one is allowed to touch him. You just ordered the arrest of the owner of this airline.
In just a few minutes, her life completely changed. She begged for forgiveness, but he simply said,
"You're making a mistake. You are wrong for choosing to look down on others."
Before we get into the story, please like, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. The flight attendant didn't lower her voice when she said it. "Sir, you're going to have to move. That seat isn't for you." A few heads turned, not all, just enough to feel it. The first class cabin of the Boeing 777 was quiet in that controlled, expensive way. Soft lighting, low conversation, the muted clink of glass against glass. The smell of leather and coffee hanging in the air, everything designed to feel calm, ordered, exclusive, and now disrupted. Daniel Brooks didn't look up right away. He was seated in 1A, window seat. The best view. The kind of seat people fought for without saying it out loud. His tray table was down, a thick folder open in front of him, pages filled with numbers, notes in tight handwriting. The kind of work that didn't care where you were sitting, as long as you could focus. "Sir," the voice again. Sharper this time. "I need you to show me your boarding pass." He lifted his eyes slowly. Amanda Collins stood in the aisle, mid-40s, perfect posture. Uniform pressed so sharply it looked like it could cut. Her smile was there, technically, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were busy doing something else, measuring, sorting, deciding. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit shifted his weight, impatient, loud without speaking yet. The kind of presence that fills space even in silence. Daniel closed the folder gently, not rushed, not defensive, just deliberate. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, tapped once, turned the screen toward her. Seat 1A, confirmed. Amanda glanced at it, barely. Her lips tightened. "Yes, well," she said, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel private, but not enough to hide it from the people nearby. Sometimes the system makes errors. "This seat is typically reserved for our top-tier passengers." There it was, not loud, not direct, but clear. Daniel held her gaze. Calm, steady, the kind of calm that didn't come from comfort. It came from experience. "I purchased this seat," he said. His voice was even, low. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." A pause, short but heavy. Behind Amanda, the man finally spoke. "I don't think you heard her," he said, stepping forward now. His voice carried, confident, used to being obeyed. "That seat is mine." A few more heads turned. The man was Charles Whitmore, mid-50s. Face flushed from travel or ego, it was hard to tell which. His suit was loud, his watch louder, gold catching the cabin light every time he moved his wrist. He looked at Daniel like he was looking at a problem that needed fixing, not a person. "I always sit here," Charles continued. "I made that very clear when I booked." Amanda nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore is one of our most valued passengers," she added, her tone shifting now, softer, warmer, almost eager. "He has specific needs." Daniel didn't look at Charles, not yet. He kept his eyes on Amanda. "And those needs," he said quietly, "require me to give up something I paid for?" Amanda exhaled through her nose. A small sound, controlled irritation. "Sir, I'm trying to resolve this smoothly," she said. "We can offer you a very comfortable seat in premium economy, full refund of the difference, and a travel credit." The words were polished, practiced, corporate, but underneath them something else, a calculation. Who mattered more? Who was easier to move? Who would push back and who wouldn't? Daniel leaned back slightly in his seat. Not retreating, just settling in. "No," he said, one word, simple, final. The air changed. You could feel it. Charles let out a short laugh, not amused, dismissive. Unbelievable, he muttered, shaking his head. Then louder, for the room. You get lucky with an upgrade and suddenly you think you belong here. There were a few quiet reactions. A woman across the aisle paused with her glass halfway to her lips. A man 2 rows back pretended to read but hadn't turned the page. Nobody spoke. That silence, it wasn't neutral. It was familiar. Daniel had lived inside that silence for most of his adult life. Rooms where people assumed before they asked, decided before they listened. He looked out the window for a second. The jet bridge was still attached, ground crew moving in slow practice patterns below. The world outside still normal. Inside, something else was building. Amanda stepped closer now, into his space. Her voice dropped, tight, controlled. Sir, you are refusing a crew instruction, she said. That can become a security issue. There it was again, that word. Security. A word that could mean anything when someone decided it should. Daniel turned his head back toward her. For the first time, there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, just clarity. How, he asked. Is sitting in the seat I paid for a security issue? Amanda didn't hesitate. You're being argumentative, she said, and that affects the comfort of other passengers. Comfort, another soft word, used like a tool. Charles crossed his arms, satisfied now, watching it unfold like a show he'd seen before. Just move, he said under his breath. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Daniel finally looked at him, really looked at him, not the suit, not the watch, not the performance, the man. For a brief moment, something passed between them, recognition, not of status, but of character. I'm not the one making this difficult, Daniel said. Quiet, but it carried. Amanda straightened. Decision made. All right, she said, her voice rising just enough for others to hear. If you continue to refuse, I will have to involve the captain and request security assistance. A beat. No one moved. No one spoke. The hum of the aircraft systems filled the space between them. Low, constant, almost like a warning. Daniel reached forward, closed his folder, placed both hands on it. Calm, measured, like a man who had already seen how this would end. Then you should do what you think is right, he said. No sarcasm, no challenge, just permission. Amanda held his gaze for a second longer, then turned sharply, heels clicking against the aisle as she walked toward the front of the plane. Charles leaned in slightly as she passed. Thank you, he said to her, already claiming victory. Then to Daniel, with a thin smile, she taking the offer. Daniel didn't respond. He picked up his folder again, opened it, but he wasn't reading anymore. The pages in front of him had numbers that moved billions of dollars across continents, decisions that shaped companies, jobs, entire systems, and yet, here he was, being asked to prove he belonged in a seat. He adjusted his glasses slightly. Slow breath in, slow breath out. Around him, the cabin tried to return to normal, but it didn't. Not really. Because somewhere beneath the surface, something had shifted. Not loud, not visible yet, but real. And in less than a few minutes, it was going to surface in a way no one in that cabin was ready for. Amanda did not slow down as she reached the galley. She grabbed the intercom phone with a firm hand, her jaw tight, her breath slightly uneven now. The mask was slipping, not completely, but enough. Captain Hayes, she said, keeping her voice controlled, we have a situation in first class. Passenger in 1A is refusing crew instruction, becoming disruptive. A pause. She listened. Her eyes flicked once toward the cabin, toward the man still sitting there, still calm. Yes, she added, firmer now. I recommend removal before departure. In the cockpit, Robert Hayes closed his eyes for a brief second. He had heard that tone before, the kind that left no room for nuance. Regulations were clear. Crew safety came first, always. He reached for the radio, his voice steady. Practiced. Copy that. I'll notify ground. Stand by. Back in the cabin, Charles Whitmore had already taken a step closer to row 1, not sitting yet. Just standing there, occupying space, like a man waiting for confirmation that the world still worked the way he believed it should. You know how this ends, he said quietly, leaning slightly toward Daniel, his voice low but sharp. They're not going to let you stay. Daniel didn't look up. He turned a page in his folder, slow, careful. The paper made a soft sound in the quiet cabin. That sound irritated Charles more than any argument could have. You think staying quiet makes you right? Charles pushed.
It just makes you difficult.
Daniel finally lifted his eyes, not rushed, not reactive, just present. No, he said, it makes me patient. That word landed differently. It didn't escalate. It didn't challenge. It just sat there. And for a second, Charles didn't know what to do with it. A woman in seat 2A shifted in her seat. She had been watching from the beginning. Her fingers wrapped around her glass a little tighter now. He hasn't raised his voice, she said softly, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough to be heard. Amanda wasn't there to hear it, but others did. A man across the aisle lowered his tablet. Another passenger leaned slightly into the aisle, pretending to adjust his bag. People were watching now, not just glancing, watching. 15 minutes earlier, this was just another flight. Now it was something else, something uncomfortable, something familiar to more people than they liked to admit. Amanda returned. Her steps were quicker this time, not rushed, but decisive. Behind her, 2 uniformed airport police officers stepped onto the aircraft. Their presence changed the air immediately. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. The quiet hum of the plane felt louder now. Amanda pointed, no hesitation. That's him. Daniel closed his folder again. This time he didn't reopen it. He rested his hands on top of it, fingers interlaced, still calm. The first officer approached, tall, broad shoulders, professional distance in his eyes. Sir, he said, firm but not aggressive, we're going to need you to come with us. Daniel looked up at him, studied his face for a moment, not judging, just reading. On what grounds? He asked. The officer shifted slightly, not uncomfortable, but aware. The crew has requested your removal, he said. At this point, you're being asked to deplane. A beat. Silence stretched across the cabin. Daniel nodded once, slow, understanding the process, understanding the system. I see. He reached down, picked up his briefcase. The leather creaked softly. He stood, straightened his jacket. Every movement controlled, measured. The second officer stepped closer, ready to assist if needed. Daniel didn't resist, didn't argue. That made it heavier somehow, not lighter. Because everyone watching knew. This wasn't about behavior. This wasn't about safety. It was about something else, something older. As Daniel stepped into the aisle, the woman in 2A spoke again. Stronger this time. This isn't right, she said. He didn't do anything. Amanda's head snapped toward her. Mom, please remain seated, she replied sharply, but the moment had already shifted. Another voice joined. Quiet! From behind, he showed his ticket, a third voice. Yeah, I saw it. It wasn't loud. Not a protest, not a scene, just truth, simple, human, and that made it dangerous. Charles rolled his eyes, dismissing it. People love a story, he muttered. They'll forget in 5 minutes. Daniel paused for just a fraction of a second as he passed him, not stopping. Just enough to acknowledge the words. Some people don't forget, Daniel said quietly. Then he kept walking. They reached the front of the cabin. The open door to the jet bridge let in a faint draft of outside air, cooler, real, not filtered. The officer gestured forward. Right this way, sir. Daniel stepped forward, then stopped. Just before crossing the threshold, he turned back, not to Amanda, not to Charles, to the cabin. His eyes moved across the faces, one by one, not accusing, not asking for anything, just seeing them. Seeing who watched, who looked away, who held his gaze. It was a long second, longer than anyone expected. Take care of each other, he said. Simple words, no anger, no performance. Then he stepped into the jet bridge. The door remained open for a moment longer, long enough for the silence to settle deeper. Amanda exhaled, sharp, quick. Relief mixed with something she didn't want to name. All right, she said, clapping her hands once, a little too bright. Let's get everyone settled. We're already behind schedule. The spell broke. Slightly. People moved again, adjusted, sat back, but something stayed, something uncomfortable. Charles finally dropped into seat 1A. His seat, he adjusted his jacket, looked around, making sure people saw him sit. Reclaim some space, reclaiming order. Ridiculous, he muttered. All that for a seat. But his voice wasn't as steady now. Not quite. In the cockpit, Robert Hayes received the confirmation. Passenger removed. Situation resolved. He nodded. Routine restored. He didn't know yet what had just left his aircraft. Didn't know what call had already been made. Didn't know how thin the line was between control and consequence. Out on the jet bridge, Daniel walked without rushing, the officers flanking him. Not dragging, not forcing, just escorting. People in the terminal glanced over, curious, then moved on. To them, it was just another situation, another passenger removed. Happens every day. Daniel didn't speak, his face calm. But his eyes were somewhere else now. Not on the moment, on what came next. He reached into his inner pocket, pulled out a second phone, smaller, plain. No brand visible. He turned it over in his hand once, then stopped walking. The officers paused with him. "Everything all right, sir?" one asked. Daniel looked up. "Give me a minute," he said. His voice hadn't changed, but something had, and in less than a minute, everything else would too. Daniel stood still in the narrow jet bridge, the hum of the airport pressing in around him, distant announcements echoing through the terminal like a low, constant pulse. The two officers watched him, not impatient but alert. They had seen situations turn before, quiet ones, the kind that looked resolved until they weren't. He unlocked the phone with his thumb. One smooth motion, no hesitation. He scrolled once, stopped on a name, Michael Grant. He tapped, the line rang once, twice, then connected. "Daniel." Michael's voice came through, sharp, awake, like a man who never truly relaxed. "I thought you were airborne." Daniel didn't move. His eyes stayed forward, focused somewhere beyond the glass walls, beyond the runway. "I was," he said, "until your crew decided I didn't belong on my own aircraft." Silence, not confusion, not disbelief. Just silence, the kind that meant everything had already changed. "Tell me exactly what happened," Michael said, his voice lower now, controlled. Daniel spoke without raising his tone. No drama, no exaggeration, just facts. The seat, the request, the assumption, the escalation, the police. Each word landed clean, measured. By the time he finished, the air on the other end of the line felt different. "Are you still at the gate?" Michael asked. "Yes, stay there." The line went dead. Daniel lowered the phone, slipped it back into his pocket. His breathing stayed even, his posture relaxed. But something beneath that calm had shifted into motion, fast, precise. One of the officers glanced at him. "You good?" he asked, quieter now. Daniel gave a small nod. "I'm good," he said. They didn't push further. They stepped back slightly, giving him space. Not because they had to, because something about him made them want to. Inside the aircraft, Amanda was moving quickly now, resetting the cabin, smoothing the disruption like it had never happened. Her smile had returned. Polished, efficient. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience," she said, her voice light again. "We'll be closing the door shortly." People nodded. Some smiled back, but not all. The woman in 2A stared at the empty aisle where Daniel had stood. Her finger still wrapped around her glass, untouched. Her expression wasn't angry. It was unsettled. Across from her, the man with the tablet finally set it down. "They moved him too fast," he said under his breath. She nodded. "They didn't want to listen," she replied. Charles leaned back in 1A, adjusting the seat controls, testing the space like he had just reclaimed territory. "It's over," he said, loud enough for them to hear. "They handled it." The woman didn't look at him. "No," she said quietly. "They ended it." Charles smirked, didn't respond. He picked up the menu, flipped through it like nothing had happened. Up front, Amanda checked her watch. Time was slipping. Schedule mattered. It always did. "Close the door," she called out. A flight attendant reached for the handle. At that exact moment, the cockpit door opened, hard, not gently, not routine. Captain Robert Hayes stepped out fast, too fast. His face had changed. The calm pilot mask was gone, replaced by something sharper, urgent. "Amanda," he said. Her name wasn't soft this time. It cut through the cabin. She turned, surprised. Captain? He didn't answer right away. His eyes moved quickly across the cabin, counting, checking, then back to her. Where is he? He asked. Amanda blinked. Who? The passenger from 1A, a beat. He's been removed, she said. Security took him off. The silence that followed was different, heavy, real. Captain Hayes took one step closer. Get him back. The words were low, but absolute. Amanda frowned, a small crease forming between her brows. Captain, he was non-compliant. He refused. Amanda, her name again. Stronger. She stopped. Something in his tone didn't match protocol, didn't match routine. It carried something else. Pressure. Get him back, he repeated. Now. Charles straightened slightly in his seat. What's going on? He asked, irritation creeping back into his voice. The captain turned his head slowly, looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since boarding, Charles felt it. Not attention. Assessment. You need to return to your assigned seat, the captain said. Flat. No apology. No warmth. Charles let out a short laugh. I am in my assigned seat, he said. No, the captain replied. You are not. The words landed like a shift in gravity. Amanda's posture changed, subtle, but visible. Captain, she said, quieter now. What is this about? He didn't take his eyes off Charles. It's about a mistake, he said, a serious one. Back in the jet bridge, Daniel hadn't moved. He stood near the wall now, looking out through the small window toward the aircraft, the plane that had just tried to remove him. Footsteps echoed from inside, fast. Amanda appeared at the doorway, slightly out of breath, her composure struggling to keep up with her pace. Sir, she called out. Her voice had changed. Not sweet, not sharp, something else, uncertain. Daniel turned slowly. Their eyes met. For the first time since this started, she didn't look above him. She looked at him directly. We need you to come back on board, she said. No explanation. No justification, just that. Daniel studied her face, the tension in her jaw, the shift in her eyes, the realization creeping in piece by piece. Why? He asked, one word. Simple, but it stopped her. She opened her mouth, closed it. For a second, she didn't have the script, didn't have the control, because she started, then paused, and for the first time, she told the truth.
Because we made a mistake.
The words were quiet, barely above a breath. But they carried more weight than everything she had said before. The officers looked between them, reading the moment, understanding enough to step back. Daniel held her gaze a second longer, not satisfied, not angry, just aware. Then he picked up his briefcase and walked past her, back toward the aircraft. Each step steady, each step controlled. Behind him, Amanda followed, not leading anymore, just trying to keep up. Inside the cabin, every eye turned toward the doorway, waiting, not for a passenger, but for an answer, and they were about to get one. The cabin went completely still the moment Daniel stepped back through the doorway, not quiet, still. The kind of stillness where even breathing feels loud. Amanda followed half a step behind him, not leading anymore, not in control, just there. Captain Hayes stood near the front, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on Daniel as he walked in. He didn't speak. He didn't greet him. He just watched, like a man waiting for something heavier than words. Passengers turned, every head, every pair of eyes, some curious, some uneasy, some already knowing something has shifted, but not what. Daniel didn't rush. He walked down the aisle at the same pace he had before.
Calm.
Measured, the leather soles of his shoes making soft, steady sounds against the carpet. Each step felt deliberate, like it mattered. Charles Whitmore was still sitting in 1A, still leaning back, still trying to own the space, but his posture had changed, slightly. He wasn't fully relaxed anymore. His fingers tapped once on the armrest, then stopped. Daniel reached the row, stopped, looked at him, not angry, not confrontational, just present. That's my seat, Daniel said, no volume, no force. But the words carried. Charles let out a breath through his nose, a short, irritated sound. I think we've already been through this, he said, turning his head slightly, refusing to fully face him. It's handled. Daniel didn't move. Captain Hayes stepped forward. It's not handled, he said, his voice cut through the cabin. Flat, clear, final. Charles turned now, slowly. What does that mean? he asked. The captain held his gaze. It means you need to return to your assigned seat, he said now. A pause. You could feel it ripple. Charles looked around, expecting backup, expecting Amanda to step in, to smooth it over, to support the version of reality he had been building for the last 15 minutes. Amanda didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. That was the first crack. Captain, Charles said, his voice rising just enough. I am a diamond tier customer. I have been flying this airline for over 20 years. I'm aware, Hayes replied. Then you should also be aware that this is unacceptable, Charles continued. Your crew already resolved the issue. No, the captain said. They escalated it. Short, sharp, unavoidable. Charles sat up straighter now. This man was being disruptive, he said, pointing slightly toward Daniel without fully looking at him. He refused to cooperate. He sat in the seat he paid for, the woman in 2A said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut in at exactly the wrong moment. Charles froze for half a second, then turned toward her. This doesn't concern you, he snapped. She didn't back down. It does when I'm watching it happen, she replied. A man across the aisle nodded once. She's right, he said quietly. Now it wasn't one voice. It was two. That mattered. The cabin shifted again, not dramatically, but enough. Charles felt it. He looked back at Amanda, waiting, still expecting. She finally lifted her head, her lips parted. But nothing came out, because for the first time she didn't know which side she was on. Captain Hayes stepped closer, closing the space. Mr. Whitmore, he said, voice controlled but firm. I'm going to ask you one more time. Please return to your assigned seat. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Charles stood up, slow, deliberate, but not graceful. There was tension in his shoulders now, in his jaw. This is unbelievable, he muttered, grabbing his bag from the overhead bin with more force than necessary. Absolutely unbelievable. He stepped into the aisle, brushed past Daniel, not touching, but close enough to feel like it. As he moved toward row 2, he leaned slightly, just enough to speak low. You'll regret making a scene, he said. Daniel didn't react, didn't even look at him. That bothered Charles more than anything else. He dropped into seat 2B, hard, adjusting his jacket like he could still fix something, still reclaim something. But the moment had already passed. Daniel turned, set his briefcase down, slid into 1A, the seat, his seat. He didn't rush, didn't claim it. He just occupied it like he always had, like it had never been taken. Amanda stood there, frozen, hands clasped too tightly in front of her. The gold pin on her uniform catching the light as her chest rose and fell just a little faster than before. She took a step forward. Sir, she said. Her voice was softer now. Careful. Controlled in a different way. I would like to apologize for the inconvenience. The word inconvenience hung in the air, thin, insufficient. Daniel looked up at her, not harsh, not forgiving, just honest. It wasn't an inconvenience, he said. A beat, her breath caught, because she knew he wasn't wrong. It was a choice, he continued. Several, actually. The cabin didn't move, didn't breathe. Every word landed. You looked at me, Daniel said, his voice steady, and decided I didn't belong here. Amanda swallowed. Hard. That's not. She started. It is, he said, not louder. Just clearer. You didn't check. You didn't ask. You decided. Each sentence short, measured, unavoidable. And when I showed you I was right, he added, you didn't correct it. You doubled down. Amanda's eyes dropped again. Her hands loosened slightly, then tightened again. A small human movement. Fear, regret, something breaking. I was trying to manage the situation, she said quietly. No, Daniel replied. You were trying to control it. That landed harder because it was true. Captain Hayes shifted slightly beside them, not interrupting, just listening, like everyone else. Daniel leaned back in his seat, finally, for the first time since this started, but his eyes stayed on Amanda. You used the word safety, he said, a small pause. You know what that word means on an aircraft? She nodded faintly. Yes. It means people listen, he continued. It means authority. It means consequences. Another pause. You used it to move a man out of a seat. Amanda closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them. And this time, she didn't look away. I was wrong, she said. Simple. No excuse. No extra words. Just that. The cabin felt it, that shift. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. Daniel held her gaze a long second, then nodded once. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. Captain Hayes exhaled slowly, like a man who had been holding something in his chest. "Let's get the door closed," he said quietly, routine returning to him. But not the same routine. Amanda stepped back, turned, walked toward the front, her steps slower now, more careful. Charles sat in 2B silent for the first time, his eyes fixed forward, not on anyone, not on anything. Because somewhere deep down he knew this wasn't over, not even close. And Daniel Brooks hadn't even revealed who he really was yet. The cabin door closed with a heavy, final sound, a dull thud, sealing everything inside. For a moment, no one spoke, no announcements, no movement, just the low hum of the aircraft systems, steady and constant, like a heartbeat you couldn't ignore. Amanda stood near the galley, hands resting lightly against the counter. Her fingers were still, too still. Her eyes were fixed ahead, but she wasn't really seeing the cabin anymore. She was replaying it, every word, every decision, every second she chose not to stop. Captain Hayes stepped back into the cockpit without another word. The door shut behind him with a soft click. Inside, he sat down slowly, headset still hanging loose around his neck. His co-pilot glanced over. "What was that about?" she asked quietly. Hayes didn't answer right away. He adjusted the controls in front of him, checked a screen that didn't need checking, then finally said, It's about to get bigger." Back in the cabin, the engine started to power up. A low vibration ran through the floor, sus at first, then stronger. Daniel sat in 1A, hands resting loosely on the armrests, his posture relaxed. But his eyes were focused, not on Charles, not on Amanda, on nothing in particular. Like he was already thinking 3 steps ahead. A flight attendant approached slowly, not Amanda, a younger one, early 30s. Her name tag read Emily Carter. She paused beside him. "Mr. Brooks," she said softly. Her voice was different. No tension, no performance, just respect. "Would you like something to drink before we depart?" Daniel looked up at her, studied her face. There was no judgment there, no calculation, just a simple question. "Water is fine," he said. She nodded. "I'll bring that right away." As she turned, Amanda watched from a distance. She noticed the difference, the tone, the ease, the absence of friction. It hit her harder than anything Daniel had said, because it showed her something simple. This is how it should have been. Charles shifted in his seat behind. The leather creaked under him. He leaned forward slightly, not enough to be obvious.
Just enough to speak.
"You made your point," he said, his voice low. "No need to drag this out." Daniel didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him right away. A beat passed, then another. "You think this is about a point?" Daniel asked, still facing forward. Charles frowned. "Isn't it?" he replied. Daniel turned his head slowly, looked at him. "No," he said, "it's about a pattern." That word landed differently, heavier, more permanent. Charles leaned back again, uncomfortable now. "You're overthinking it," he muttered. Daniel didn't respond, because he knew. This wasn't something Charles would understand in one conversation. Maybe not ever. Emily returned with the water, placed it carefully on the side table. "Here you go," she said. Daniel nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated for a second, then added, quieter, "I'm sorry for what happened earlier. Not corporate, not scripted, personal." Daniel looked at her again. This time there was a slight change in his expression, not a smile, but close. "I appreciate that," he said. She nodded once, then moved on, simple, clean, real. The plane began to taxi, slow movement. The outside world sliding past the window, lights reflecting off the wet tarmac. Inside, the tension didn't disappear. It settled, changed shape. Charles picked up his phone, scrolled, didn't read. His thumb moved, but his mind wasn't there. Something about the captain's tone earlier, something about Amanda's silence, something about the way the room had turned. It didn't sit right. He leaned slightly into the aisle again. "Look," he said, softer now, almost like he was trying a different approach. "If this is about compensation, I'm sure we can." Daniel turned his head. That was enough. Charles stopped mid-sentence, because this time there was something different in Daniel's eyes. Not anger, not calm, something colder. "I don't need your help," Daniel said. Flat. Clear. Final. Charles nodded slowly, leaned back, and for the first time since boarding, he stayed quiet. Up front, Amanda finally moved. She stepped into the aisle, walked slowly down toward row 1. Each step heavier than the last. She stopped beside Daniel, not too close, not too far. "Mr. Brooks," she said. Her voice was steady, but quieter than before. "I want to apologize again." Daniel didn't look up this time. He took a sip of water, set the glass down, then said, "You already did." She nodded. "I know," she replied, but that wasn't enough. A pause. The cabin listened. "Even the ones pretending not to. I made a judgment," she continued, "and I didn't correct it when I had the chance." Her hands were clasped again, but looser now, more honest. "I've been doing this job for over 20 years, she said. "I thought I knew how to read people." Daniel finally looked at her. "And now?" he asked. A small breath left her. "Now I think I've been reading the wrong things." That landed, because it wasn't offensive. It wasn't polished. It was true. Daniel held her gaze a long second, then nodded once. "That's a start," he said. Amanda's shoulders dropped slightly, not relief, but something close. Acknowledgement. She stepped back, didn't say anything else, because she understood now. This wasn't something she could fix in one apology. The plane reached the runway, paused, engines rising, a deep, growing roar. The cabin vibrated. Everyone leaned back slightly as the force built. Daniel rested his head lightly against the seat, closed his eyes for a moment, not to escape, to center, because he knew what was coming next was going to change more than just this flight. And somewhere behind him, Charles Whitmore felt it too. He just didn't know why yet. The engines roared to full power, pressing everyone back into their seats as the aircraft surged forward. The runway lights blurred, a long streak of white and gold rushing past the windows, then lift, a subtle shift, weight giving way, the ground falling back. Inside the cabin, the noise was loud, but the tension louder. Daniel opened his eyes slowly as the plane climbed. He didn't look out the window. He didn't check his watch. He simply sat there, breathing steady, like a man who had been here before, not just on a plane, in moments like this. Moments where something had already been set in motion, and there was no stopping it. Behind him, Charles gripped the armrest during takeoff, not out of fear, out of habit, control. The moment the wheels left the ground, he relaxed again, adjusting his jacket, trying to return to the version of himself that felt solid. But something wasn't sitting right. He glanced forward, at Daniel, at Amanda near the galley, at the cabin, and for the first time he felt off balance. The seatbelt sign remained on. The engine softened into a steady hum as the plane leveled slightly in its climb. Captain Hayes' voice came over the intercom. Calm, professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now airborne. We'll reach cruising altitude shortly. We appreciate your patience during departure." A standard announcement, nothing unusual. But the pause at the end, just a fraction longer than normal. Some noticed. Most didn't. Amanda stood still for a moment after the announcement, her hands resting lightly on the counter again, her reflection faint in the polished surface. She looked tired. Not physically, mentally, like something had cracked open and she couldn't close it again. Emily stepped beside her quietly. "You okay?" she asked. Amanda let out a slow breath. "Yeah," she said. But it didn't sound convincing. Emily nodded anyway, because sometimes that's all people need. Not solutions, just space. "Service starts in a few minutes," Emily said. Amanda nodded. "I'll take the lead," she replied, her voice steadier now, back into routine, but not the same routine. Daniel reached into his briefcase, pulled out that second phone again, the small one, the one he hadn't used until now. He held it in his hand for a second, then unlocked it. A message was already waiting, from Michael, short, direct, handled. Daniel read it once, no reaction. He locked the phone, slid it back into his pocket. Nothing about his posture changed, nothing about his expression shifted, but the decision had been made, and it wasn't his. It was already in motion. Up front, Captain Hayes removed his headset slowly. He looked over at his co-pilot. They confirmed, he said. She frowned slightly. Confirmed what? Hayes exhaled through his nose. Ownership. A pause. Her eyes widened just a fraction.
You're serious?
He nodded once. Effective this morning. Silence filled the cockpit. Different from before. Heavier. So, the man in 1A, she started, is not just a passenger, Hayes finished. They both sat with that, understanding what it meant. Not just for the flight, but for everything tied to it. In the cabin, service began. Emily moved smoothly between seats. Professional, calm, natural. She stopped by Daniel again. Can I get you anything else? She asked. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, thank you. She nodded. Then added quieter, if you need anything, just let me know. Simple, respectful. He met her eyes. I will, he said. She moved on. No tension left behind. That contrast, it stayed with Amanda as she watched. She approached row 1 again, not rushing, not hesitant, just present. Mr. Brooks, she said. Daniel looked up.
Yes?
She took a breath. A real one this time. I spoke with the captain, she said. He didn't react, didn't ask, just listened. There are things happening I wasn't aware of, she continued. Careful words. Measured. Daniel held her gaze. And now you are, he said. Not a question, a statement. Amanda nodded. Yes, a beat. Her hands rested lightly at her sides now. Not clenched, not defensive. I don't know everything yet, she admitted, but I know enough. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying her, not judging, not excusing, just seeing. And what does enough tell you, he asked. Her throat tightened, but she answered. That I didn't just make a mistake, she said. I made it worse when I had the chance to stop. That landed, because it was honest. Daniel nodded once. That matters, he said. A small shift in her shoulders, not relief, but grounding. She stayed there for a second longer, then stepped back, letting the moment end naturally. Behind them, Charles was watching. He had been listening. Every word, every tone, and now something was starting to click. Not fully, but enough. He leaned forward again, not aggressive this time. Just probing. What exactly is going on here? He asked. No one answered. Not Amanda, not Daniel. That silence, it said more than any explanation could. Charles sat back slowly, his mind racing now. Because the room had changed, the power had shifted, and he didn't know where he stood in it anymore. Daniel picked up his folder again, opened it, but his focus wasn't on the pages, it was on timing. Because he knew the reveal wasn't coming from him, it was coming from somewhere else. And when it did, it wouldn't be quiet, it wouldn't be subtle, it would land hard. And everyone in this cabin would feel it at the same time. The seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft, controlled sound, a small signal, routine. But nothing about the cabin felt routine anymore. Amanda stepped into the aisle again, this time not for service. Her eyes moved toward the cockpit door. She hesitated for half a second, then walked forward and knocked twice. A pause. Then the door opened just enough for her to slip inside. The moment it closed behind her, the cabin shifted again. People noticed. They didn't speak, but they noticed. Charles leaned slightly into the aisle, watching the door like it might give him answers. It didn't. Inside the cockpit, Amanda stood still. Captain Hayes didn't turn right away. He finished writing something down, slow and deliberate, then set the pen aside. You needed to see me? He asked. Amanda nodded. Yes, she said. I need to understand what's happening. Hayes looked at her. Really looked. Not as a colleague, not as a crew member, but as someone who had crossed the line. What's happening, he said slowly, is that you misjudged the situation. Amanda swallowed. I know that, she said, but this feels like more than that. Hayes leaned back slightly. It is, he said. Silence filled the cockpit. Tight, controlled. Amanda's voice dropped.
Who is he?
Hayes didn't answer immediately. He let the question sit, because once it was answered, it couldn't be taken back. He's the majority owner of this airline, Hayes said. Flat, clear, final. Amanda blinked once, twice. Her body didn't move, but everything inside her did. That's not possible, she whispered. It is, Hayes replied. Her breath caught. Her mind started racing. Replaying every second, every word, every look. Her stomach dropped. When? She asked. This morning, Hayes said. The deal closed early. A long silence followed. Amanda's hand slowly moved to the edge of the console, steadying herself. I had him removed from his own aircraft, she said. Not a question, a realization. Hayes nodded once.
Yes.
The word landed like weight, heavy, unavoidable. Amanda closed her eyes just for a second, then opened them again. Different now. Certainty was gone, replaced by something else. Understanding. Fear. Responsibility. What happens now? She asked. Hayes looked at her. Not unkind, but not soft either. That depends on what happens next, he said. Back in the cabin, Daniel hadn't moved much. Same seat, same posture, same calm. But the energy around him had shifted, subtly. People weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for something they couldn't quite name. Charles leaned forward again. He couldn't help it. What did you do? He asked. Daniel didn't look at him. Nothing, he said. That answer didn't sit right. Not with the way the captain had spoken. Not with the way Amanda had disappeared into the cockpit. People don't react like that to nothing, Charles pressed. Daniel turned his head slowly, met his eyes. You're right, he said. A beat. Then he looked forward again and said nothing else. That was worse, much worse. Because now Charles knew there was something. He just didn't know what, and not knowing was eating at him. The cockpit door opened. Amanda stepped out. Her face had changed, not pale, not shaken, but stripped of the certainty she walked in with. She stepped into aisle, paused, looked at Daniel, then at the rest of the cabin, and for a brief moment, she didn't know where to stand. Captain Hayes followed her out. He didn't stop at the galley. He walked straight into the cabin. That alone was unusual. Pilots didn't do that mid-flight unless something mattered, something serious. The cabin went quiet again, that same heavy silence. Charles sat up straighter. This is getting ridiculous, he muttered. No one responded. Hayes stopped beside row 1, turned slightly, addressing no one and everyone at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, voice steady, I would make a quick clarification regarding a situation earlier during boarding. A pause, every eye on him. The passenger seated in 1A, he continued, is not just a ticketed customer. Another pause. Charles felt something tighten in his chest. Mr. Daniel Brooks is the majority shareholder of this airline as of this morning. Silence. Absolute. The kind that swallows sound. The kind that doesn't bounce back. It just sits there. Heavy. Unavoidable. Charles didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The words didn't process right away. They couldn't. Because they didn't fit the version of reality he had built. The version where he was the most important person in the room, where he decided who belonged, where money looked a certain way, and now that version was breaking, right in front of him. The woman in 2A slowly lowered her glass, her eyes fixed on Daniel, not surprised, not shocked, just understanding, because something about him had already told her. Amanda stood frozen, her hands at her sides, her shoulders still, but inside, everything was collapsing into place. Every assumption, every decision, every mistake. And now there was no distance left between her actions and their consequences. Daniel didn't react, didn't correct, didn't expand. He simply sat there, quiet, composed, exactly the same as before. Because for him, nothing had changed. The truth had just caught up. Charles finally moved. A small shift, then another. His hand slid off the armrest. His posture collapsed slightly. Not visibly to everyone, but enough to feel. That doesn't make any sense, he said. His voice wasn't strong anymore. It wasn't sharp, it was searching. Daniel turned his head, looked at him, and for the first time there was no patience in his eyes, only clarity. It doesn't have to make sense to you, he said. Short, direct, final. And just like that, the balance of the entire cabin shifted. Not gradually, not subtly, completely. No one moved for a long second after the captain's words settled into the air. Not a single sound. Not a single breath loud enough to break it. It was the kind of silence that didn't come from confusion. It came from realization. Charles blinked. Once, twice. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. The calculation in his head was fast now. Faster than before, trying to catch up. Trying to rebuild something solid from what had just collapsed. That's not possible, he said again, but this time it sounded weaker, thinner, like he didn't fully believe it himself. Captain Hayes didn't respond. He didn't need to, because the room had already accepted it. Daniel hadn't changed. That was the part that made it undeniable. Same posture, same calm, same quiet control. The kind of presence that didn't need to prove anything. Amanda finally stepped forward, slowly, her shoes barely making a sound against the carpet. She stopped beside Daniel's seat, not above him, not in front of him, beside, a different position, a different posture. "Mr. Brooks," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something in it now that hadn't been there before. Respect. Not forced, not performed, real. "I need to address what happened," she continued. Daniel didn't interrupt. He let her speak. Because now, she had to. "I made a decision based on assumptions," she said. "And I acted on it without verifying the facts." Her hands were no longer clasped. They hung at her sides, open. "I escalated a situation that didn't need to exist," she added. A pause. The cabin listened, not because they were curious anymore, because they understood the weight of it. Amanda took a breath, and then said the part that mattered. "I treated you differently because of how you looked. No hesitation, no softening, just truth." It landed hard. The woman in 2A closed her eyes for a brief second, not surprised, just hearing it out loud. Charles shifted again, uncomfortable, because now this wasn't about status. It wasn't about loyalty programs. It was about something deeper, something harder to argue with. Daniel looked up at Amanda. His expression didn't change much, but there was a shift in his eyes. Not softer, not colder, just clearer. "You did," he said. 2 words, nothing more. Amanda nodded. "I did," she repeated. The repetition mattered because it wasn't defense. It was ownership. She swallowed once, then continued. "And when I was given the chance to correct it, I chose not to." Her voice dropped slightly, not weak, just honest. "I chose the easier option." That line stayed in the air because everyone understood it. The easier option, not the right one. Daniel leaned back slightly, his fingers resting lightly on the armrest. "And what do you think the easier option was?" he asked. Amanda didn't look away. "To move you," she said, instead of standing up to someone louder. Charles looked down at his hands. That hit him directly. Amanda didn't stop there. "I prioritize comfort over fairness," she added. Another pause. "And I used my authority to enforce it." The captain stood still behind her, listening, not intervening, because this mattered more than procedure. This was about something deeper than a seat assignment. Daniel nodded once. Slow, measured. "That's accurate," he said. No anger, no praise, just acknowledgement. Amanda exhaled slowly, like she had been holding something inside her chest and finally let it go. "I can't undo what I did," she said, her voice steadier now, "but I can make sure it doesn't happen again." Daniel watched her, carefully, not judging, not forgiving, just assessing. "And how do you do that?" he asked. Amanda didn't hesitate. "By changing what I look for," she said, "and what I listen to, a beat. Not the noise," she added, "the truth." That line settled differently, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about her and what she was willing to face. The cabin felt it, that shift. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. Emily stood a few rows back, watching, her arms folded lightly, not defensive, just present. She saw it. The moment where someone stopped protecting themselves and started taking responsibility. It wasn't common, but when it happened, it mattered. Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. Closer now, more direct. "You understand something most people don't," he said. Amanda's eyes lifted slightly, waiting. "That these moments don't come from one decision," he continued. "They come from a pattern. Short sentences, clear. They come from what you believe before anything happens." Amanda nodded slowly, because she knew that was the part that had been there long before this flight. "I see that now," she said, quiet but firm. Daniel held her gaze, then leaned back again, conversation over. Not because it was resolved, but because it had reached the truth. Amanda stepped back, not dismissed, just done. She turned, walked slowly toward the galley, different now, not lighter, but clearer. Charles sat frozen in his seat. His world had shifted, not just because of who Daniel was, but because of what had just been said, out loud, in front of everyone, and he had no response for it. No argument, no defense. Because deep down he recognized it, even if he didn't want to admit it. He leaned forward again, but this time there was no arrogance left, only uncertainty. "I didn't know," he said quietly, not to the room, to Daniel. Daniel turned his head in slowly, looked at him. A long second passed. Then he said, "You didn't ask." Simple, direct, final. Charles nodded slowly, because that was true. He hadn't asked. He had decided, just like Amanda had, and now he was sitting with it. The engines hummed steadily around them, the cabin lights soft, the world outside dark and distant. Inside, something had shifted, not just in seats, not just in power, in people. And that was harder to ignore. The cabin settled into a strange kind of quiet. Not tense anymore, but not relaxed either. It was the kind of silence that comes after something has been said and cannot be taken back. Service resumed. Trays moved. Glasses clinked softly. The routine of the flight tried to return, but it felt different now, more careful, more aware. Emily moved through the aisle again, this time slower. Not because she had to, because she was paying attention. She stopped beside the woman in 2A. "Would you like anything else?" she asked. The woman shook her head. "No, thank you." Then she hesitated, looked toward Daniel, then back at Emily. "He handled that well," she said quietly. Emily followed her gaze, watched Daniel for a second. "He didn't make it about winning," she replied. The woman nodded. "That's rare." Emily didn't answer, because she knew that wasn't just about him. It was about what people choose to do when they finally have the power to respond. Up front, Amanda stood near the galley, watching the cabin, not supervising, observing. Her posture had changed, less rigid, more grounded. She wasn't scanning for status anymore. She was watching people, their faces, their reactions, their silence. And for the first time in a long time, she was actually seeing them. Captain Hayes stepped out briefly. Not urgent this time. Not sharp. He moved down the aisle slowly, checking in, making his presence known. But when he reached row 1, he paused. "Mr. Brooks," he said. Daniel looked up. "Yes, Captain?" Hayes held his gaze. "I want to apologize personally," he said, "for how this was handled." His tone was different from Amanda's. Not emotional, not heavy, just direct, professional. "I appreciate that," Daniel replied. Hayes nodded once, then added, quieter, "It won't be repeated." Daniel studied him for a second, not questioning, just confirming. "I believe you," he said. That mattered. Hayes straightened slightly, then moved on. No need to stay, because the message had been delivered. Behind them, Charles sat still, too still, his tray table down, a drink in front of him, untouched. His mind wasn't on the flight anymore. It was somewhere else. Back in the moment he spoke, back in the moment he assumed, back in the moment he didn't ask. He leaned forward slowly, resting his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor, then finally said, "I've been flying for over 20 years. No one responded, but Daniel heard him. "And I've never had this happen," Charles continued. His voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't proud. It was searching. Daniel turned his head slightly, listened. Charles exhaled. "I always thought I understood how things worked," he said. A pause. "I thought I knew who belonged where." That word again. Belonged. It hung in the air. He shook his head slightly. "I didn't even question it," he admitted. Daniel watched him, quiet, present. "And now?" Daniel asked. Charles let out a small breath. Now, that word carried weight. Now meant after. After everything has shifted. After the illusion broke. "I'm not sure what I know anymore," Charles said. That was the most honest thing he had said all day. Daniel nodded once. "That's where it starts," he replied. "No lecture, no judgment, just that." Charles looked up, met his eyes, and for the first time there was no arrogance left, just a man sitting in a seat, trying to understand something he had ignored for years. A few rows back, a passenger adjusted his seat and leaned toward his wife. "That could have gone very differently," he whispered. She nodded. "But it didn't," she replied. He glanced toward Daniel. Most people would have made a scene. She looked at him. Most people don't have that kind of control. The word control mattered because it wasn't about power, it was about how you use it. Daniel picked up his glass of water, took a slow sip, set it down, his movements unchanged, unhurried. He reached for his folder again, opened it. This time he read, actually read, because the moment had passed, at least on the surface, but underneath things were still moving, decisions already made, calls already placed, consequences already unfolding. Amanda stepped forward again, not toward Daniel, toward the center of the cabin. She stopped, looked around, took a breath. "I want to say something," she said. Her voice carried, not loud, but clear. Passengers looked up. Some surprised, some curious, some already knowing. "This job teaches you to read people quickly," she said, "to make decisions fast." A pause. "That can be useful," she continued. Another pause. "But today, it wasn't." Her eyes moved across the cabin, not avoiding, not hiding. "I confused confidence with correctness," she said. The line landed because it was simple and true. "I thought I knew what I was seeing," she added. Her voice softened slightly. "But I didn't." Silence followed. No one interrupted. No one needed to. Amanda nodded once, to herself, then stepped back. No applause, no reaction. But something shifted again, not dramatic, not loud, but real. She returned to the galley, different, not fixed, but changed. Daniel didn't look up from his folder. He didn't need to, because this wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. It was about what people do when they realize they've been wrong, and whether they choose to face it or walk away. The engines hummed steadily. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. The flight continued, but something had been left behind, on the ground, in that moment, and something else had taken its place. Quiet, unseen, but stronger than before. The cabin lights dimmed slowly as the aircraft settled into cruise. A soft glow replaced the earlier brightness. Outside the window, the sky stretched dark and endless, the last traces of the city gone. Inside, everything felt quieter, not just in sound, in people. Daniel closed his folder, not abruptly, not as an ending, just done for now. He rested his hands lightly on his lap and leaned back into the seat. His eyes moved once across the cabin, not searching, not checking, just observing. The same people were there, same seats, same space, but something had shifted in each of them. Emily moved through the aisle one more time, collecting empty glasses. When she reached Daniel, she paused for a second. "Everything all right?" she asked. Daniel nodded. "It is," he said. She smiled lightly, not a big gesture, just enough. Then she moved on. Amanda stood near the galley again, still, watching, not with tension anymore, with awareness. Her shoulders were lower now, her posture no longer rigid. She wasn't performing control. She was holding responsibility. That difference stayed in her eyes. Captain Hayes remained in the cockpit, but the weight of what happened sat with him too, because he had seen it before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. Moments where the system worked, and moments where it didn't. And today it had almost failed. That mattered. Charles sat in silence. His drink was still untouched. The ice had melted. Water now where there had been something stronger. He didn't notice. His hands rested loosely on his knees, his gaze unfocused. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't trying to control the room. He was trying to understand it. That was new. A few rows back, the woman in 2A finally exhaled fully, like she had been holding something inside her chest for too long. She glanced once more toward Daniel, then leaned back. Not tense anymore, just settled. The plane moved steadily through the night. No turbulence, no sudden shifts, just forward. Time passed, minutes folding into hours. The earlier moment didn't disappear, it stayed, but it changed shape. It became quieter, deeper. Less about what happened, more about what it meant. Daniel reached for his phone once more, the smaller one. He unlocked it, another message. Short, complete, all internal actions initiated. Training review scheduled, crew report filed. He read it, locked the screen, placed it back down, no reaction. No visible change. But something had already been set, not as punishment, not as revenge, as correction. That was the difference. He wasn't interested in destroying anyone. He was interested in fixing what allowed it to happen. That was where real power lived. Not in the moment, in what came after. Amanda approached one last time, not as an authority, not as a correction, just as a person. She stopped beside his seat, didn't speak right away, just stood there for a second, then said, "I've been thinking about what you said." Daniel looked up, listened. "I always believed I was good at my job," she continued, "and maybe I was, but I was measuring the wrong things." Her voice was calm now, clear. "I saw status, not people," a small pause. "And today, that cost me something I didn't even realize I was losing." Daniel studied her, then nodded once. "Awareness always comes with a cost," he said. She let out a small breath. "I see that now." Another pause. "But I also see something else." Daniel didn't interrupt. "I can choose differently next time." That mattered more than anything else she could have said. Daniel leaned back slightly. "That's all that matters," he replied. "No praise, no approval."
Just truth.
Amanda nodded, then stepped back. No need to say more, because this wasn't about words anymore. It was about what she would do after this flight. Charles finally looked up again. His eyes moved toward Daniel. He hesitated, then spoke. Not loud, not confident, just honest. "I've been in rooms my whole life where people made space for me," he said. A pause. "I never asked why." Daniel met his eyes. "And now," he said. Charles swallowed. "Now I think I should have." Daniel held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. That was enough, because some lessons don't need to be explained. They just need to be seen. The cabin felt quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. Not heavy, not tense, grounded. The kind of silence that comes after something real has been understood. The plane continued forward, cutting through the dark sky, unseen from the ground, but carrying something more than passengers. It carried a moment, a choice, a correction. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again, calm, present, exactly as he had been from the start, because true power never needed to prove itself. It simply existed, quiet, unshaken, unmoved by noise. And when the moment came, it revealed itself without raising its voice. Some people in that cabin would forget what happened. They would move on, return to their routines, their assumptions, their habits. But some wouldn't. Some would carry it in small ways, in quiet decisions, in moments where they paused instead of assuming. And that was where change actually began. Not in loud confrontations, but in quiet awareness, in the choice to see people before judging them. The plane moved steadily toward London, miles passing beneath them, time unfolding. And somewhere in that quiet cabin, a few people had changed. Not completely, but enough to matter. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause and think about how we see others in everyday moments, take a second to like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment with 3 simple words that reflect what you felt. Something like choose respect always or see people first.